Welcome to the debate. Next time you look in the mirror, what do you expect to see? I mean, your face, your posture.
Maybe the bags under your eyes after a particularly long night, right? You expect a literal one-to-one reflection of your physical self.
Right, exactly. But imagine if that glass didn't just show your physical reflection. Imagine a mirror that, I don't know, analyzes the slight tremor in your hand.
Or measures the micro hesitations in your step and then immediately diagnoses your deepest, most tightly held anxieties. It doesn't just reflect you, it reads you.
Yeah. And that paradigm shift is exactly what we are dissecting today. We're looking at a reality that is, well, it's no longer science fiction. It is actively unfolding in our pockets and on our screens right now.
So the core question we are debating is this. Should artificial intelligence and algorithms act as global administrators of human mental health?
About a world where billions of daily interactions, from a subway commutes in Tokyo to a cafe in São Paulo, are being processed.
Processed by immense artificial neural networks to map human psyches on a planetary scale. AI is stepping into the role of a digital psychologist.
And I am coming at this from the perspective of a technology optimist. I'll be arguing that this represents an incredible, unprecedented breakthrough. AI offers universally accessible mental health support and profound self-knowledge to populations that have never had it.
And as a critical psychologist, I take the exact opposite view. I will argue that these systems do not represent genuine therapeutic care. Instead, they exploit our deepest cognitive vulnerabilities. They strip us of human agency to act as tools of corporate monetization and control.
To really understand the magnitude of this breakthrough, I think we have to talk about the historical reality of mental health care. For centuries, clinical insight has been an incredibly scarce resource.
Because it requires geographical proximity to a clinic, massive amounts of time,
And money, right. Most prohibitively, it costs a lot of money. What AI does is completely shatter those barriers through democratization. We are looking at highly precise, always available diagnostic tools.
But let's clarify what recognizing patterns actually means in this context. It's not a therapist deeply listening to your childhood trauma.
No, it's operating mathematically, which, honestly, in many ways is far more objective. The system looks at a massive data set and calculates a probability. Using deep learning models like GPT or BERT, it essentially says, given the specific sequence of late-night keystrokes and rapid scrolling, there's an 80% probability this user is entering a depressive episode.
An 80% probability. Just an equation.
Yeah, essentially, P of behavior given data is greater than 0.8. And once it knows that, it can intervene. Look at how mental health apps like Calm are functioning right now. They analyze the subtle acoustic tones of your voice, comparing them against millions of clinical samples to detect depressive states.
Right, but
Or look at chatbots like Wobot. They're providing 24/7 accessible AI therapy to people in the favelas of Rio or remote villages in Ethiopia. These are individuals who would otherwise have absolutely zero access to psychological help. We have democratized the clinical mirror.
I see the appeal of that narrative, I really do, but I come at it from a very different way. What you are describing as therapeutic care is in reality a systematic monetization of human vulnerability.
How so?
Well, to understand the mechanism here, we have to look at behavioral economics, specifically Daniel Kahneman's concept of System 1 versus System 2 thinking.
Right. For the listeners who might not be familiar with Kahneman, break that down for us. What is the difference between the two?
Sure. So think of System 1 as your slow, rational, conscious brain. It's the part of you that decides to go on a diet or save money or go to sleep early.
The logical side.
Exactly. System 1, on the other hand, is your fast, intuitive, highly emotional brain. It's the impulse that grabs the junk food before your logical System 2 can even react. And these algorithms are specifically engineered to bypass your conscious, rational mind entirely.
You're saying they only speak to System 1?
Yes, they exploit those emotional impulses before you even realize you're having them. The source material we are looking at brings up a brilliant concept from Carl Jung, the collective shadow.
The idea that we all have repressed, unconscious impulses that we hide from society?
Exactly. And AI is exposing that shadow, not to help us integrate it and heal, but to monetize it. We are seeing a profound Freudian vulnerability leaking through our clicks and swipes. Take TikTok, for example.
With its, 1.5 billion global users?
Yeah, huge scale. It doesn't ask you what you want to watch. It tracks micro-hesitations. If you hover over a fast-paced dance video for just an extra half second, it registers an extroverted, highly stimulated state.
And if you linger on a video about burnout?
It registers an anxious, cautious state. It then adjusts the feed in real time purely to maximize dopamine release and keep you locked in. It feeds the anxiety to secure the engagement. That isn't a digital healer. That is a Pavlovian conditioning mechanism designed to farm human attention.
Okay, I hear you, but honestly, you're painting these companies as cartoon villains pushing buttons to make us dance. Let's strip the emotion out of the corporate intent for a second.
It's hard to strip the emotion out when that's exactly what they're targeting.
Fair. But let me offer a different perspective. The origin of the intervention, whether it's an algorithm maximizing an engagement metric or a human therapist genuinely caring about you, does not actually negate the positive outcome of the care provided.
I strongly disagree with that.
Well, let's look at how this plays out in the real world. In Japan, with its massive aging population, SoftBank's Pepper robots don't just carry things. They analyze hesitant speech patterns and facial drooping in the elder to detect loneliness and cognitive decline, and then they step in to provide interaction.
But interacting with a robot isn't curing the systemic issue of elderly isolation, it's just pacifying it.
Maybe, but it is undeniably better than absolute isolation. And let's look at financial institutions. In Brazil, major fintech companies like Nubank or PicPay offer what they call financial empathy plans.
Financial empathy? That sounds like an oxymoron.
It's actually fascinating. If their data shows a user has suddenly started delaying payments, the system doesn't immediately send a hostile debt collector. The API cross-references data and sees a recent spike in online searches for, say, how to win back your ex or divorce lawyers.
Wait, hold on. So the bank knows you're going through a breakup?
Exactly. The AI connects the financial delay to the emotional distress. It recognizes that this isn't a chronically irresponsible borrower, this is a human being in crisis. So it adjusts the interaction, offering a grace period or a restructured payment plan without the punitive fees.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that framing at all. Calling that empathy is deeply problematic and frankly a bit Orwellian.
Why? It's using data to offer grace.
Because empathy requires a shared human experience. A server rack cannot feel empathy. What you are describing is consumer retention masked as care. They are securing a long-term customer by appearing friendly during a highly vulnerable moment.
But does the intention really matter if the result is that the user doesn't lose their home while they are grieving a divorce?
It absolutely matters because the exact same mechanism is used to exploit people when they are weak. Consider the flip side of that predictive model. Look at massive delivery platforms like iFood or Mercado Libre, analyzing a user's 2 a.m. pizza order.
Okay, what about it?
The AI doesn't just see a transaction. It reads the context. Late-night, high-calorie, rapid checkout. It compares this against the baseline and flags it as a sign of acute loneliness or stress. And what does it do with that psychological insight?
Let me guess, it pushes more food.
Yes. It pushes emotional comfort coupons for ice cream the very next night. It incentivizes a destructive coping mechanism just to secure another transaction. This isn't therapy. The global behavioral AI market is projected to hit $50 billion by 2026.
Right.
That money isn't being made by making people whole. It's made by keeping them consuming.
That's a strong point, and I won't deny that marketing algorithms capitalize on behavior. But let me offer an analogy to reframe how we view the tool itself. Think of a standard medical thermometer.
Okay.
A thermometer is just cold glass and mercury, or a digital sensor. It possesses absolutely no genuine empathy for a patient, yet it accurately diagnoses a physical fever. And that accurate diagnosis allows us to intervene and save a life. The empathy doesn't reside in the thermometer.
But a thermometer is passive. You choose when to use it.
True. But look at the predictive power we are dealing with here. Studies from Stanford University demonstrate that 70% of human emotions are now predictable via digital data.
70%.
Yes, the algorithm sees the anger in a sudden shift to all caps typing or the sadness in repetitive search queries. If we possess a digital thermometer that is 70% accurate at diagnosing an impending psychological crisis, isn't it profoundly irresponsible not to use that precision to offer help?
It's a compelling argument, but it completely ignores the existential cost of that precision. Let's stick with your analogy. A medical thermometer doesn't remember your fevers from 5 years ago.
Right?
It doesn't cross-reference your fever with your bank account, and it certainly doesn't use the memory of your illness to manipulate your behavior tomorrow. But algorithms do. Let's look at the mechanics of LSTM, long short-term memory algorithms.
Right, so we aren't just talking about a single snapshot of data anymore.
Exactly. Standard algorithms might look at what you clicked today, but LSTM algorithms are designed to remember temporal sequences over vast stretches of time. They don't just see a single late-night search.
They see a pattern.
They see the specific rhythm of your infinite scrolling on Twitter over a 6-month period. They build a comprehensive psychological profile that predicts chronic insomnia or a depressive spiral weeks before it hits. And they use that against you.
How so?
Consider the thought experiments of the Zara app using this behavioral data. Imagine you're walking through a shopping mall and you pause in front of a red dress.
Let me jump in here. So in this scenario, the app is tracking my physical location through my phone's GPS.
Location, your dwell time in front of the store, and maybe even your biometric response if you're wearing a smartwatch. The AI reads that physical hesitation. It interprets the context, maybe cross-referencing your searches to know you have a high school reunion coming up and you're feeling insecure.
Okay.
And precisely at that moment of maximum emotional vulnerability, it sends a personalized notification to your phone with a discount for that exact dress.
And you're saying that's a bad thing? I mean, I wanted the dress and I just got a deal on it.
I'm saying it fundamentally compromises your agency. It activates what behavioral scientists call an anchoring bias. When that notification pops up exactly when your willpower is lowest, your brain doesn't process it as corporate marketing.
It processes it as luck.
Yes, System 1 processes it as a serendipitous solution to your insecurity. You buy the dress, completely believing it was your autonomous choice. It creates a state akin to a lucid dream, where we feel in control, but the environment is entirely constructed around our psychological triggers. Our deepest secrets are used against us.
I understand the fear there, I really do. But I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because I think it wildly romanticizes how much agency we actually possess in the first place.
What do you mean?
You mentioned Kahneman earlier. We are already creatures of habit, heavily governed by cognitive biases. We're acting on autopilot most of the day anyway.
But surely the goal is to wake up from the autopilot, not hand the steering wheel over to a tech conglomerate?
But human therapists do exactly what you're criticizing. They look for unconscious patterns. They listen to the things you say when you don't realize you're saying them. The difference is that AI simply does this without the barrier of human self-deception.
It's an invisible process, though.
Not necessarily. When we talk about how this data is processed, we're looking at APIs using edge computing in real time.
Which means what, practically, for the user?
It means the processing happens effectively locally. The AI identifies profiles using something called hierarchical clustering.
Let's clarify that term, hierarchical clustering. That's essentially the AI sorting our behaviors like Russian nesting dolls, right?
Exactly. It takes a massive, messy pile of behavioral data and groups it. It sees you staying up late, eating poorly, and ignoring texts, and it clusters those habits into a specific profile, like the anxious seeker. It categorizes the data objectively to offer an intervention before a crisis escalates.
And you think that gives us agency?
Yes, if we are already blind to our own biases, doesn't having an AI mirror that explicitly points out our patterns, allowing us to ask, wait, what do my patterns say about me, actually give us more agency rather than less?
I fundamentally disagree. The system isn't designed to show you the strings so you can cut them. It is designed to pull them more efficiently.
I think that's a bit cynical.
If the algorithm explicitly shared its hierarchical clustering with you, if you opened your phone and it said, I am manipulating your feed because my data shows you are vulnerable to anxiety today, then perhaps you'd have a point about self-reflection. But it doesn't. And that brings us to the most dangerous societal consequence.
The geopolitical scale of the data.
Precisely. If this psychological mirror is held by a handful of global corporations and governments, we aren't talking about self-discovery anymore. We are talking about geopolitical control.
But the data is universal.
Yes, but the ownership isn't. The scale of the data imbalance is staggering. 80% of our daily behaviors are currently captured by tools like Alexa. Yet 90% of this deeply intimate data flows directly to servers controlled by entities in the US or China.
But I would argue the universal nature of that data is exactly what makes it so uniquely powerful for global mental health. Think about traditional psychology. It has historically been heavily biased toward Western, educated, industrialized populations.
True, but
But now, a behavioral data point from a user in Astorga, Parana, feeds into the exact same models built on data from Mumbai to Los Angeles. It is creating a unified understanding of the human mind.
a unified understanding that is owned by private servers?
But look at where the technology is heading. By 2030, we are moving toward quantum AI and neuromorphic artificial intelligence.
Neuromorphic, meaning it mimics the physical structure of the brain?
Yes, it mimics human synaptic plasticity. Instead of just running rigid code, the hardware itself adapts based on how you interact with it. It will read biometrics through your front-facing camera to understand your exact state of arousal or fear. This will make therapeutic care astonishingly tailored.
Tailored or perfectly manipulative.
And we have to remember we're not operating in a lawless void here. Guardrails are actively being built. We have the European Union's AI Act, which strictly categorizes behavioral manipulation as unacceptable risk. We have rigorous debates right now in Brazil's Congress on ethical AI. The system is regulating itself.
I wish I shared your optimism about those guardrails. I really do. But historically, regulation always lags behind the technology. And the unified understanding you're praising is currently being weaponized in broad daylight. Let's look at Tencent's social credit system in China.
Okay.
This isn't theoretical. It acts as a psychological big brother that literally rewards compliant behavior with cheaper loans and punishes dissent with restricted travel.
But that is a state-sponsored surveillance apparatus, not a mental health application.
The underlying mechanism is identical, though, using behavioral data to enforce an optimal psychological state. And look at the private sector. Look at M-Pesa in Kenya. They analyze transactions to predict emotional poverty. And instead of offering grace, they offer high-interest microcredits that lock vulnerable populations into endless debt cycles.
I mean, those are definitely the darkest manifestations of the technology.
We've even seen this manipulate democracy. Look at the electoral manipulation in India, where mood-based algorithms flood WhatsApp with specific emotional triggers based on a district's psychological profile. It creates what sociologists call the panoptic effect.
The idea that being watched changes behavior.
Exactly. When a population knows an algorithm is tracking their psychology, they self-censor. They build a wall inside their own minds. That is not mental health care. That is the architecture of a psychological prison.
I see why you emphasize those extreme applications, and no serious technologist denies that surveillance capitalism exists. However, our debate is whether the system should act in this capacity. And to summarize my position, AI behavioral analysis is a revolutionary tool.
A tool that takes our autonomy.
It transcends borders, it transcends class, and it provides essential, real-time mental health care and self-awareness to populations that previously lacked any access. The thermometer might be cold, but it is undeniably saving lives in Rio, in Ethiopia, and globally. We cannot let fear blind us to its capacity to heal.
And to summarize my stance, treating the human mind as a predictable dataset strips us of our fundamental agency. It takes our deepest emotional impulses and turns them into tools for corporate monetization and global control. Genuine empathy cannot be calculated by an API. A machine designed to maximize engagement can only offer you a highly personalized illusion.
Yet, despite our deeply different framing, I think we both agree on one undeniable fact. The scale of this cognitive revolution is staggering. Human psychological data is now a planetary resource.
Completely agreed. And that demands absolute individual awareness from all of us. It means monitoring our data streams, using VPNs, utilizing privacy tools like Jumbo, and fundamentally cultivating offline habits.
And that brings up the fascinating concept being debated in privacy circles, the right to opacity, the fundamental human right to be psychologically invisible to the machine, to leave your patterns unclustered.
Exactly. And as we navigate this labyrinth, the listener must decide for themselves. Is the artificial intelligence looking back at you, a compassionate mirror, helping you understand your hidden patterns? Or is it an instrument of control? We leave it to you to explore further in the material.
Which brings us back to our opening thought. The next time you stand in front of a mirror, ask yourself what it is actually reflecting. And the next time you pause over a late-night search, just ask yourself, who else is measuring that hesitation? Thank you for joining us on The Debate.